it can be hard to know what you want too, because your brain gets confused. The wants versus what you think you're supposed to do.
Welcome back to Meet Bridget, a show that sheds light on the often untold teenage and young adult stories of successful women from all types of backgrounds and in all sorts of careers. This show is an extension of our confidence coaching service for young women. I'm Kashia, and I co-host this show alongside my best friend and Bridget founder, Asha Gabriel. We're on season 4 of Meet Bridget, and today I'm really excited to bring somebody very special to the show. She's a woman I deeply love and admire, Brynn Brothers-Ochoa.
Hello, it's
Br-
me.
yes. Brynn is a full-time freelance graphic designer. When she doesn't have her eyes glued to a computer screen, you can find her teaching fitness classes at a local rock climbing gym, traveling, or getting lost outside. She's an athlete, a coach, a dog and cat mama. She's an open book who's carved her own path one step at a time, learning to live life intentionally and with as much adventure and joie de vivre as humanly possible. She also spends a lot of time wondering why we as a society decided we should live to work instead of just live to live. So I'm really excited to pick your brain and wax poetic. Welcome, Brynn.
Thank you. Hello.
Hello.
What a welcome.
Um,
I'm already gonna start
yes.
crying.
No, don't cry. So
Tears
just
of
for
joy.
our long-time listeners, new-time listeners, some of you might know I have a very big and diverse family, and Brynn happens to be a wonderful part of that family. She is the wife of one of my cousins who's a firefighter in the Bay Area, and together they live one of the most fun, kaleidoscopic, fulfilling lives. They're some of our favorite travel buddies. They're our favorite dive buddies. And Brynn has this incredible calmness and gentle demeanor wrapped up in this badass fitness explorer adventurer who's also incredibly creative. And you guys have done such an amazing job of curating this life that is so true to who you are and is such a picture of success. And so I'm really excited to get into that. So before we get started, just like we do with all of our other guests, I want to hound you about your childhood and your teen years.
Of course.
So tell us where you're from, a little bit about your background.
Sure. Okay. Where I'm from. That's a question that I'm not always sure how to answer. Is it where you were the longest, where you felt the most at home? I don't know. But if
Where
we're
were you
going,
born?
yeah, if we're going chronologically, I was born in San Diego. We lived
Oh, I
there
didn't know
for,
that.
yeah, I'm a California native,
I
I
didn't know
guess.
that. I've been calling you a cheesehead this
I
whole
know.
time.
I know. What is this?
Okay, keep going.
Okay. Anyway, born in San Diego, was only there for about a year because I was definitely an oopsie baby, and oopsie baby number two was on the way, my sister. So my parents were like, we need to save money. And my mom wanted to get her MBA. And so Guam was the answer. So we moved to
What?
Guam. I know. It was affordable, and her master's program that was like pretty good for, oh gosh, her MBA, and she's going to shoot me for not knowing that's something CPA related, accountant related. Anyway, we moved there. I have memories of living on Guam, and they're very good memories. So we were there until I finished first grade there. And they were like, my parents were feeling like they wanted to make a change because they wanted to make sure that their kids were going to schools that they felt were of the proper caliber.
Mhm.
And so my dad had an opportunity through a job to move to Wisconsin, which was a big change.
Yeah.
So
Is the weather similar?
no,
I'm just kidding.
I remember being surprised that snow fell from the sky. Remember, I was like 7 years old.
Yeah.
I thought it was like the beach, like it was just there already on the ground,
Life is
like
beach.
sand. Yeah, life is beach.
Yeah.
And so I remember being really awed and amazed at snow, and like it was falling from the sky. It was really, snow used to be my favorite season.
Yeah.
Winter used to be my favorite season because it was so, new and cool. Anyway, so moved to Wisconsin in first grade, had to repeat first grade due to their testings,
Yeah.
and figured it out from there. I remember definitely feeling like an outsider because I would sharpen my pencils with my scissors because that's how we did it on Guam. And I remember being made fun of. They're like, "We have pencil sharpeners." I'm like, "I do too. It's in my hands. It's right here. I don't have to get up. I don't have to
I'm
stand in
I'm
front of the class."
I'm already seeing where this thread of resourcefulness comes from.
Right?
Wait, okay. I have a quick aside and probably a follow-up question. So obviously our listeners can't see you. Brynn is a stunning, like tall, athletic, brunette, fair-skinned, light-eyed, like just gorgeous woman. I think it's such a striking like picture in my head of this. First of all, you and your sister, Narina's blonde and like has like curly
Hmm.
hair. Like the two of you growing up in Guam, which we have family there, but I've never been. So, but it's an
Let's
island and
go.
it's yeah, it's an island. It's actually very expensive to get to now. So it's funny that that was the place that you guys chose at the time. Um, and so it's really interesting because you moved back to the mainland and you were the
Hmm.
outsider.
Right? I felt at
Um,
home at Guam, but I was the outsider
yeah,
there.
the unlikely outsider.
Yeah.
Yeah. So did you have a hard time making friends or did you and your sister I know are very close, but were
Hmm.
you guys always like kind of sticking together?
No, we were definitely, I wish it was some happy story of like, yes, we've always had each other's back, but no.
Yeah.
I mean, we've
Yeah.
always loved each other and we definitely had our tender moments, but I was a very typical older sister who
Yeah.
bullied and tortured and put my younger sister through the ringer. And somehow we are stronger than ever now. We have a very close relationship as adults, but it definitely went through its through the ringer. And I'm gonna say because of me, because my sister has always had a big heart, but I was definitely the
Oh.
jerk.
Well, older sisters have a lot of pressure, like figuring things out, kind of paving the way.
Oh yeah.
Um, there's a recent study that came out about how like oldest sister syndrome actually belongs in the DSM-5, which is like the
Oh,
psychiatric
interesting.
scoring. Yeah. And I was like, I would vote for that. Okay, so what did your dad do? Like what brought you guys to Wisconsin job wise and I want to hear more about the experience of growing up there.
Yeah, so my dad got a job. He's a mechanic, and mechanical engineer, and so he got a job with a company that sold clutches for like lawnmowers and like yard. It was very niche, I guess, but he
Oh, a what?
a clutch,
What?
a clutch.
Oh, clutch.
Yeah, not like a purse,
Yeah,
but like the I don't even actually necessarily know what it is, other than it goes in an engine and it's important for that.
like the thing that catches it. I would just like in a car, like catches it and like turns the engine over.
That sounds right. I mean, I know like when you're driving stick, you have to push in the clutch, so that sounds,
I
related.
made this up in my head. I was like, "Well, it's
It sounds
okay, so
logical. Let's go with it.
yeah,
Please no fact checking.
yeah. So dad made clutches.
Yeah, Wisconsin. Yeah, it was a bit I definitely felt odd. I remember bringing sushi to school for lunch and kind of being picked on for like eating sushi at school, but also I'm like, to me, it's so normal. So it was weird doing things that were normal in one setting, but then in a whole new setting being judged for it and people like thinking it's odd. So like
Yeah.
it does a weird thing to your brain, I guess, where you're like, "Oh, this is good," and then you come in, everyone's like, "You're weird," and you're like, "Oh, I guess I don't know what normal is," or
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
concept. So I was still like a happy-go-lucky person. I wouldn't say making friends was hard. And maybe part of that was because you're still young and impressionable. I definitely remember making a really good best friend that lasted for quite a long time before we grew apart from each other. But I was also such like a weirdo. And looking back as an adult, I don't know if people, at the time wanted to hang out with me because they thought I was cool or because I was weird and entertaining. Which to me at that age it was all the same. I'm like, "Ooh, attention,
Yeah.
that's great." Like
Yeah.
I would run around outside barefoot. I didn't think shirts were something that everyone needed to wear. I remember like proving I was this must have been like second or third grade. Like it wasn't
Yeah.
at school, but we used to live in an apartment, and behind the apartment were like these woods, and we would hang out in the woods.
Yeah.
And I remember some boys being like, "Oh, you're a girl, so you have to wear a shirt all the time." And I was like, "No, I don't." And I took my shirt, and I was like, "See?" And I stood all proud, and they ran away.
Oh my God.
And my
We
sister
need,
was there, and
w- was she mortified or was she like, okay,
yeah,
let me
she
take my
was
shirt off too?
mortified.
Okay.
No, I remember her being like, "You can't do that," and she's like a year and a half younger than me, so we were definitely on different wavelengths.
What I love about Narina, and we'll probably talk more about this later because you guys have such a great relationship, but she, I don't see her as being the little sister that copied everything that the older sister did. She
Mm-mm.
definitely like figured out her own path too, and she's like totally unique in her own way too.
She definitely learned a lot of what not to do from me.
Okay, so your parents wanted you guys to have more of like a quote unquote like typical experience or like more um with like the PC way, because my dad had sort of like the same sense when we were growing up. We were for a while at a predominantly Hispanic school. And so it wasn't that my dad didn't want us to be with Hispanic kids, but he
Hmm.
felt like at the time, like, okay, a lot of attention is being given to, teaching them the language and integrating like their needs into the classroom. And he felt like my brother was falling behind because of that. I don't know how much of
Mm.
that is true, but so they decided to switch. Like that's when we moved to Agua Dulce, which was a whole other terrible monster in and of
Oh
itself.
no.
But it's kind of a similar thing where your parents have like this, and all parents I think do their absolute best to give their children what they need, like with the
Hmm.
tools that they have at the time.
Right.
And it's not always perfect. I can appreciate that as a mom now, but they moved you to Wisconsin for this like quote unquote more like typical upbringing. But then did your mom ever say like, Brynn, like not everyone here eats sushi for lunch? Or like was there like any other guidance after that? Or was she just like, go on, let your freak flag fly?
It was definitely go on, let your freak flag
Yeah.
fly. Which I think is a good thing in the long run, but like a
Yeah.
little odd in during
Yeah.
in the moment. I
Yeah.
mean, they
I
were
love,
learning too because they had been off the mainland for so long too, living in Guam, and definitely they're going through life for the first time too, so they were figuring things out
yeah.
along the way. So
Yeah. And your mom is definitely like, I love Eve Brothers so much, but she's like her own very unique person too. So I love
yes,
her.
yes.
She's got like all her hobbies and quirks and she's great. Do you want to talk a little bit more about like your adolescent years and teen years and like what that was like any weird moments or things that you feel like continue to form the person you are today?
Yeah, I would say adolescent or like, grade school years were easy and fun. And I have like a lot of really good, for the most part, memories from that. It wasn't until I started getting older, like closer to puberty, closer to starting to get my own ideas, and questioning, like wanting to ask why a lot, where things started to get really, I guess, stressful in the family, and where we started to really, I don't want to say fall apart. We didn't fall apart right away, but it was like a slow burn, I guess.
Yeah.
And there was definitely red flags along the way, looking back, that could have been, you know, cries for help early on if people knew how to recognize it or knew what to do with it as we came into the teenage years. Very different from, the preteen years.
Yeah. Yeah. That like loss of innocence a little bit.
Yeah, loss of innocence. My dad really did not. He was in the military. Not by the time like I was born, he was already out of the military. But I think that military mindset of like do as I say, not as I do, and don't question it. Like if I say jump, you say how high. That was very
Yeah.
much his like dogma, and
Yeah.
something that he enforced into his daughters.
Yeah. I could see because you are all really strong women, including your mom, who obviously was not raised by your dad, but like you're all very, very strong women. And I don't know if it's like a Capricorn thing because you and my sister are both early January. But one of the things that I really admire about you is regardless of the situation, and there have been many a stressful situation in our family as adults, but regardless of the situation, I tend to look at you and see you as like the calm fixture, like everything could be like hurricaning around you, and you are like the stable part of it, like the fulcrum, especially for my cousin. I want to dig in a little bit as to like how that part of you formed and like where that comes from.
Yeah, maybe it's because I have experienced things that were crazy and right, like if
Yeah.
you've seen the worst of it and seen how bad things can get, like it kind of puts things into perspective. Not to rate that anyone's, trials and tribulations are worse or better than others. It's just it can put things into perspective for you. And you start to it can help you, it can be a mirror, I guess, to really evaluate like what's important, what's worth putting your energy into or not. And I've learned through trial and error about like interjecting too early or jumping to a conclusion too early before really seeing the whole picture can also mess
Hmm.
things up. So I think sometimes when I'm in my sitting and observation phase, that can look like calm, but really inside I'm like, okay, connecting
Spinning.
dots, dee, like, yeah, all the
Wheels
math
are turning.
equations are like floating out. Yeah,
It's like Queen's Gambit. You're like staring at the ceiling and watching a whole chess
yeah,
game.
yeah.
It sounds like you became much more ruminative as like your teen years progressed because home was like, you had like this great, childhood, and you have your sister and your parents who like love you guys. But like your dad sounds like he was strict. So it sounds like to navigate
Hmm.
that, you kind of adopted this like sit back and observe and like figure out, you learned how to be a little bit more logistic, and I don't want to say calculated because I feel like that has a negative connotation, but I feel like
Hmm.
you're very like you said, good at observing a situation before you make your next move. You'd probably be really good at
Yeah,
chess.
and I don't have the patience for chess, I think is the problem. I
You're
don't know.
very
There's something
patient,
that
but
probably should be dug into there.
yeah.
I'm I think for chess, I'm the one who wants to flip the board, but
Yeah.
um, yeah, I guess my parents, by the time I was a teenager and could like recognize these things, they were so opposite. My dad was so like verbal and he would yell and he would pound and he would break things. Like I remember making him so mad that he it's the biggest adult temper tantrum I've ever seen. He like, punched through our metal front door. Like I had lied to him about like, oh, I'm going to a sleepover, the typical, Hollywood
Yeah,
bit, I
teen
guess. Like I'm
thing.
going to a sleepover, but I went to a party. Yeah. And somehow he
Did you
found
wear a
out, right?
shirt?
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
Yeah. Once I hit puberty, I was like, ah, fine, I'll wear shirts.
Okay, keep going. I'm sorry for interrupting.
No, no. And I remember him finding out about like that I had lied to him. And growing up, I always knew that lying was like the cardinal sin. Like if you lied to him, that was the worst thing that you could possibly do. And that was, if we had ever lied to him growing up, like that was grounds for a spanking. And we would have to go to the closet and pick out which belt we would be spanked with. And then he would spank us for lying, getting caught like
Yeah.
anything simple, like, did you brush your teeth? And then he knew that we didn't brush our teeth. And if we said, yes, I brushed my teeth, like you'd get spanked.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I lied and I guess for him, this was a big lie, right? Because he never wanted us to go to parties. I remember him really being like, I want you to be as open and honest with me as possible. Like I'm an open book. You can talk to me about anything. Anything comes up, tell me. But the caveat is, but if it's difficult and I don't like it, I'm going to be mad. Like,
Yeah. Which is not the same thing.
so it's not the same thing, but my mom, she was like that. I could come to her for anything. I remember being like curious about like alcohol and drugs and all the things that come up with teenagers that you're like curious about because, you're taught about it in some shape or form and whatever. And my mom would be honest with her experiences with me. And I really appreciated that honesty because I think when you're curious, right, there's a part of you like that is like, should I try this? Should I not try this or whatever? And I think being open about those conversations were really healthy for me because I'm like, oh, my mom had this experience with it. I trust her opinion. Like maybe it's not something I want to get into because of, what she shared. And I would go to these parties and my dad, I would always lie to him, even though the consequences were high. I just got better at lying, which is not a good,
Yeah.
you know, I'm not
But did your
advocating for
mom
that. But
did you tell your
my
mom
mom
but
knew where I
not your
was.
dad? Yeah.
Yes, exactly. 'Cause I'm like, well,
Oh
there's still
no.
a safety component. So one of my parents should know where I am. Yeah, and the rift just grew
Yeah.
bigger. Like,
Yeah.
and this one party in particular, my mom knew I was at a party, and my dad had found out because through a friend or whatever, found out that I was at a party instead of a sleepover, and he went off. Like I had never seen like, steam coming out of his ears, yelling at the top of his lungs, like punching through the door and the wall, storming out into the street to just like scream into the abyss. It was a big adult temper tantrum, and it was really scary. And I
Yeah.
remember my mom just like, because I didn't know what to do other like with his emotion, because right, I felt very like at fault because I'm like, well, I did lie and blah blah blah, and I'm a bad
Mhm.
person is what I felt in the moment. And I remember my mom just like her and I like in the corner of a room, and she's just like holding me, rocking me back and forth, like as a 16-year-old, right, being held by her, which was I've always felt her love, but and this is something I've talked about with my mom and my sister. She never stood up for us to him. She never really, in all these instances, she never really told him to like stop or to calm down. She never put him in check or like kind of balance things out about like, hey, what your dad just did was wrong. And you shouldn't have
Mhm.
been treated like that. And that's something I've reconciled with now as an adult. But it was definitely challenging in the moment to like feel her love, but also not have someone stand up for you when you need it. And I think that's something that was really formative too, of like, well, if she's not going to do it, I'm going to have to do it. Like something needs to
Yeah.
happen. But it did make me feel for a long time that I didn't love myself. Like I didn't feel worthy of anything. I didn't feel like I didn't love myself. I didn't feel like I was important. I was like, I'm just another, blob with legs like on this planet. I don't know. Like, and I didn't. I drank a lot in college and like didn't really care about my future at one point because I thought I just didn't matter.
Yeah. Yeah. Which breaks my heart to hear because I mean, I'm glad I know the outcome. But it breaks my heart because
Spoiler.
I so feel that teenage girl trying to figure out and navigate life. And that at baseline, I think is already really hard. And then when you're
Hmm.
going through a tumultuous time, and thank you for sharing, because it's not, it's really heavy, right? Like, you know, I can appreciate as an adult now and as a parent now, like the things that we do as adults and parents that are huge mistakes. But when you're living on the
Right.
other side of it as a child, like it really affects the way you develop and the way that you feel about yourself and who you end up becoming, sometimes forever, sometimes, for a very long time. And so that's is really difficult to navigate. I can feel so much for that teen version of you that was just trying to like figure things out but had already decided, because I did something wrong or because I am not this like perfect version, which is, a made up thing based on like your dad's
Hmm.
reaction. We're very much animals where we like learn behaviorally like that. Um, that, you felt that way about yourself for a while. So, I mean, you said you didn't really have a sense of direction, but your mom had gotten her secondary, she completed grad school at this point. She'd completed her master's
Yeah.
program.
Yeah. She had
Yeah.
finished her master's.
Did you ever feel like, okay, because my mom did this, like this is what I want to do, or you just totally like didn't have a sense of what you loved?
I didn't have a sense of what I mean, I knew what I loved actually. I knew I was always creative. I liked art. I liked creating things with my hands. I liked design, and I knew I would draw a lot. Like I have sketchbooks from childhood that I keep because, they're sentimental to me, and it's fun to see
Yeah.
how I've progressed since then and how things have changed. And I was crushed because I remember instead of doing like my math homework, my dad like had a chat with me about like art's not going to pay the bills. You need to focus on your math homework, right? And
Mhm.
I remember that really sucking, but also didn't know how to verbalize it or defend myself or anything at the time because I'm like, well, I'm really good at this. I'm really bad at math. I'm like, so why would I do that? But I mean, I understand the importance of math, but it was more of like a just do it, but I'm also not going to help you with it. So
Yeah.
figure it out was hard.
Yeah.
Or if I needed help, it would always end in like a crying match of like me just being frustrated because I didn't understand something, or I would ask questions and they would be both my parents would be frustrated about like just do it. It's so simple. But my brain didn't work in that same way. And I remember, God, this is so damaging. My mom used to tell me that she's like, I'm pretty sure you have a learning disability. I'm like,
Oh,
that's not helpful.
Eve.
And like, right? I mean, I love you, mom, but we've had this chat too.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't think that's up to you to diagnose me. Even if I did, help
Yeah.
me. Don't shame me for it, you know?
Yeah. Did she ever like bring you in to get evaluated?
No. So, exactly. Which is a whole
By the
different part
way,
of my personality of like, if you hear me complain, I will do something about it. I'm not just a complaint into the wind and hope it resolves.
yeah, which is I'm seeing a thread here, which is incredible because like your capacity for learning and figuring these things out, like I just love it. But I'm not going to geek out just yet. Okay, so keep going.
No.
You knew you loved art, but like there was
Okay.
no connection between like this is what I can do because you just didn't have
Right.
any feasible pathway of encouragement.
Yeah, no one helped me with those connections. I was being actively discouraged from,
Yeah.
navigating or trying to like lean into something that I liked just naturally, being like, oh, like I'm leaning into this. This is cool. Can I explore it? And was kind of told no. But at the same time, my parents really valued education and, titles and degrees. And I think by pure stubbornness, they learned early on that I was not going to be their doctor child. Which my poor sister definitely um, in school did really well, and they kind of focused efforts onto her, which took the pressure off of me unfairly.
Yeah.
But also, I didn't know what I wanted to do, and because I had a lack of direction or like something that didn't feel like me, I remember being terrified to graduate high school because I'm like, what do I do after this? Like, I'm supposed to know what I want to do. I'm supposed to be applying to colleges. I didn't know how to apply to colleges. I was told all the things that you're supposed to have, like you should have a grant, you should be working on scholarships, you should be like setting your bar so high. And so people
Yeah.
would tell me what the goal was, but I didn't know how to reach that goal. And the goal didn't sound desirable to me. I'm like, I don't want those things. I don't want the pressure of like, to me, it felt really bad because like that pressure of like, well, what if I fail? Does that mean I'm nothing? Because I already feel like I'm nothing. I don't want this
Yeah.
external validation that's like, yeah, you really are nothing. It felt like
Yeah. Like
crushing.
even too scared to try.
Exactly. Yeah.
I went through a similar complex, like first gen Americans, so, like, and my dad didn't finish college. He went straight into the film business. So like they had
Mhm.
no concept of how to guide either. And by the time I got to senior year, like I know there were resources, but I by that time I was like, I don't even know like the questions I should be asking. Like I was always smart, like you're incredibly smart. But unless you have somebody kind of paving the way, it can be a really confusing time. Um, I know you did go to college, so like how did you land
Mhm.
on your school and like what did you decide on studying and why?
Yeah, so I I definitely resonate with what you just shared. It's exactly what it feels like. I had applied to some schools that I knew that were like easier to get into. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do other than like I knew my love of the ocean and I knew to stay away from art is what I was told at the time, right? So I was like, I'm going to be a marine biologist because then I can play in the ocean all the time. And it's sciencey, and so that's fine. And I actually, by some weird stroke of luck, I'm great at science, but shit
Yeah.
at math, or sorry, terrible at math. So I was like, okay, maybe this is like a sneaky way that I can do something I kind of like, but then also check the box of like having it be, within the STEM field, right? Of like something that
Yeah.
is approved, air quotes approved, right? And I remember getting accepted to Arizona State University, and that was a big choice of like, do I leave home? Do I not leave home to go to this college? It was a party school, which I think it's still a party school, which kind of excited me at the time, but also terrified me. And I had other home things going on. You know, you're getting kind of like the abridged version, I guess, of what was
Yeah.
happening. But I was in a very toxic relationship of, a boyfriend at the time. And my mom, who I knew now because I was old enough to understand, was really struggling with alcoholism. It was such a weird mix of like, do I leave and do something for myself, or do I martyr myself and stay? Because one, I can say that I'm martyring myself, like I'm staying for my mom. And two, I could hide and be like, "Oh, well, I need to stay at home because my mom needs me," or whatever. And I was scared. I could hide that I was scared by saying that I couldn't leave because of whatever reasons, right? And so I
Hmm.
didn't go to Arizona State. I didn't leave. I ended up going to University of Milwaukee, which was fun in itself, but I also kind of felt like I failed myself, and like I knew that fear was what made me choose that way. And I remember
Yeah.
feeling guilty about it, like judging myself for like choosing fear versus like putting myself out there. Because
Hmm.
again, the fear to fail, right? And being
Yeah.
far away from
Yeah.
resources and unknown. So I went to University of Milwaukee. I changed my degree like 3 times because I didn't know what the heck I wanted to do. My GPA was abysmal. I was, sometimes going to class. I was partying way too much because that felt, free. Like
Better.
I remember feeling
Yeah.
like, oh, I'm a better. I wasn't in the holds and the grips of my dad, like watching my every move. I
Yeah.
felt like, oh, I'm an adult, so I can do
Yeah.
this.
It's just crazy how much I relate to this. And I mean, we talk all the time, but we haven't, we haven't, done a deep dive like this into like just Bryn. But it,
Mhm.
this must be something that if I can relate to it, I'm hoping other people can too, because I remember choosing my school because it was in Los Angeles. It was a good school and I could live there, but it wasn't far away. And I was in a toxic relationship. And you think at the time that you're doing all these things, like clearly we made those decisions based on fear. But like at the time, I don't know if
Mhm.
you did this, but I told myself, like, there's a million good reasons why I'm doing this. It's close by. So, like, if I need to go home or like, and you kind of like sell yourself short without acknowledging that you're doing that. And so there
Mhm.
was a period for me, and sometimes still I'm like, I wish I'd made a different decision or that I'd been brave enough to know that there were other decisions
Yeah.
I could make and that it'd be okay. But it feels like it's the right one and you come up with all the right reasons for it. I don't regret it, I guess, because my life has become my life, and you
Right.
live a beautiful life. But it's so interesting how as a young adult you're like, this makes sense.
Right. And you just think you already know everything, right? Until you learn more
Yeah.
and you're like, "Wait, I don't know everything."
Yeah, I know nothing.
Yeah. The older I get, the less I know.
Yeah, yeah. So your mom is struggling with this disease, and you are kind of
Mhm.
like, I wouldn't say mirroring it, but like you're looking for ways to kind
Kind
of
of.
break free and feel like yourself, like you have some control, it sounds like, over just what you want to do. Because I get this sense that
Mhm.
you went to college like, because education's important, and like I'm sure you don't regret going to college, but like you didn't really know what you wanted to do and you chose these things based on your dad saying like don't do art.
Right.
So you're like, I feel like the only time that you have like agency is this time where you're off like partying.
Yeah, exactly. And it's in college in general, right? Drinking is just and drinking heavily is really
Yeah.
it's normalized, right? It's just part of it and
Yeah.
you feel included, and like if you're drinking and doing shots and all that, you feel like, "Oh, this." For some reason it feels so much bigger than what it is, and like when you're in the moment, you're like, "Oh, it feels right. Like I'm included. I'm in the energy of the moment, the heat of the moment, like you're just with it and it feels so important." But looking back, you're like, it's not. But for some reason
Yeah.
in the moment it feels like it. You're
Yeah.
like,
Was there a certain point where you kind of started to say, um, these are the things that I want to do? Like outside of like, so you're like creating space for yourself, right? And like
Hmm.
school, and I mean, you're doing the education part, but like the grades are kind of like on the, taking a back seat. But was there like a turning point for you where you're like, you know what, screw it. I'm just going to focus on art.
Yeah, and it was part of it is my sister. By this time, her and I were talking more. She actually went off to, she was brave enough to leave. She went to San Diego State, and I would go visit her often. And I really, through her, I was able to see like a world outside of Wisconsin and outside of what I was already doing. And so that perspective, I think, really helped. And her and I connecting more and feeling like safe, sharing secrets with each other helped. And I saw how she, to me, I thought she was thriving and doing great and making something for herself, and I was like, oh, that looks like that probably feels good.
Yeah.
And I decided that like I wanted to be closer to her, but also I was like, what if I just tried something artistic, something that felt right? What if I just try it, because I'm already not doing great. It was kind of like I had nothing to lose, which is so weird how in
Yeah.
a lot of instances in my life I can look back of when I took off the pressure from myself that I actually did really well.
Yeah.
And it's like a
It's
weird
funny.
headspace to be in. Yeah. But
It's
good.
funny how
What
that
once you
works.
can reach
Yeah.
it. Yeah. And so I was like, well, I've got nothing left to lose. Why don't I try it? And so I was like, okay, what's more on the artistic side, but still feels like, because I still had that part of my brain that was like, but it has to be lucrative, because like for some
Yeah.
reason making money was success, right? And that's
Mhm.
how I saw it then. And so I'm like, okay, what about interior design? Like, I like design part. I feel like an inkling to that. That seems like something I could get into. And so I looked for schools and found a school in San Francisco, which I'm like, cool, it's in San Francisco. That's close to San Diego, which it's not. I mean, in terms of Wisconsin to San Diego, sure, it's closer. But I was like, it's in California. I can visit her every weekend.
It's just one state. Never mind, it's like
Yeah.
the longest, like most spread out state ever.
I
It's not the same
remember
size as Wisconsin.
it's not. And I remember like getting the U-Haul, packing up all my stuff, and they were like, "Okay, where's your end destination?" And I was like, "San Francisco." And they're like, "Okay," and they type it in. And I had found an apartment in Oakland, which is in the East Bay, so not in San
Yeah.
Francisco proper, right? You know
Yeah.
this, but for others.
Yeah.
And so it's not in San Francisco proper. And I remember getting to Oakland, dropping the stuff off, going to the U-Haul to drop it off. They're like, "You're not supposed to drop this off here." I was like, what? They're like, your return is San Francisco. I was like, yeah, this is San Francisco. So I was very naive, but luckily they gave, 21-year-old me a break. They're like, okay, don't do this again. But
Oh my God.
yeah, you don't know what you don't know until you get there.
Yeah.
But
Did your parents support this decision? Because, like, this
yeah.
is like the first big move far away from home.
Yeah, my mom definitely supported it. At this point, I was not talking to my dad. I think I had decided it wasn't healthy to maintain a relationship with him. I remember trying to, and then feeling like I couldn't, for a myriad of reasons. So I don't really remember what his opinion was on me for leaving. Um,
Hmm. But you
but my
didn't
mom
care.
definitely I didn't care. Yeah, I started to, exactly. I was like, his opinion, I have learned, on my life is really not helpful.
Yeah.
But my mom definitely supported it. She was still very much struggling, with her own demons. But her love for my sister and I has never faltered. That has always really felt apparent, which is nice. And I had grandparents living out here or near here, and they were able to help like visit apartments for me, which is so sweet of them. They went on
Oh,
like,
that's great. Yeah.
yeah, I had like searched on Craigslist, I think, and so they were able to. People won't, or I don't know if they still do or not, but at the time they wouldn't rent to you without meeting you first. And so I was like, what if you met my grandparents? 'Cause I couldn't afford to fly out here and apartment hunt.
Just to look. Yeah.
Yeah, and so my grandparents did that for me, which is very sweet. And they wrote up all these notes about like their like tips from each place and which spot they thought I would like, and it was very endearing. And
That's actually so great because, like, one, the Craigslist killer.
I know
Two,
I
two,
agree.
Oakland is like it's become a really like up and coming area. Like it's beautiful. It's very cleaned up now, but it wasn't like 10, 12 years ago.
Yeah,
It
that would have
was
been
not
2010.
something,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. It wasn't like the greatest place for you to just like go explore and be like, I'm gonna live here.
Oh my gosh, the
Like
culture
unless you
shock.
knew. Yeah.
Yes. I grew up in a very small town in Wisconsin. It was very sheltered. And so moving from, I'm going to say the middle of nowhere. If you're there, it doesn't feel like the middle of nowhere, but compared to Oakland, it's the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
And I remember being like, what have I done? And it was during a time when a lot of riots were happening. And I grew up such a sheltered and very, like, I had lived in Wisconsin for, oh gosh, math, a long time since I was in first grade until until college. There's the
So like 10
math.
years.
Yeah, more than 10 years, 15 years, something like that.
It's funny because like first culture shock Guam to Wisconsin and then
Mhm.
Wisconsin to Oakland. That's where this sense of adaptability comes from. And I like really see that thread of like resilience, adaptability, resourcefulness. Like you just like kind of figured it out. And then I love too that Narina really helped broaden, like your little sister actually helped broaden things.
Mhm.
And once you guys like started talking again, I'm sure about like your shared lived experiences at home,
Yes.
um, that really opened up and was like a catalyst for you to like take that next step out of your comfort zone. Did you feel like once you started taking classes and you were in this new program, did you feel like, wow, this is really what I'm supposed to be doing, like something creative?
Yeah, I was shocked. I was shocked by how much I liked it. I I think there was a lot of factors is that I was, I threw myself into a new situation, which was really scary, but I also it provided this opportunity to see different parts of me that I didn't know existed. And so I really learned so much about myself by, putting it out there. And started taking these classes and learning that like I'm good at it. I was like so shocked. I was like, wait, I like it and I'm good at it? This can exist? Like who knew? Like actually like tuning in to intuition and being authentic could provide such a gift.
Yeah.
And I was shocked, and I removing myself from the toxic things that were happening in Wisconsin definitely helped. Drinking less alcohol was like amazing. It wasn't really that I did it on purpose,
Yeah.
but I noticed I'm like, there's something to dig into
There's a
there.
positive correlation
Yeah,
here.
weird. And it was scary, but like in a good scary, like I don't know. I really enjoyed it. And so navigating something new, and I learned that I could trust myself because I had to be resourceful and figure things out. And if I did it wrong, there was no one else to blame but me, but if I did it right, I could credit myself for that too, which felt really nice. And then it's interesting having like, this mirror for yourself and looking from the outside in, but not being able to do that unless you're in a new situation. So it kind of made me, not kind of, it did make me realize that like new things can be scary, but you can still do them, right? And that's bravery, is doing the thing anyway and just acknowledging that you do feel scared and being okay with being scared while you're doing it. And really feeling that like it's one thing reading it in a book, but then when you're actually doing it, you're like, oh, I'm doing it. Like it's pretty
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, I love that because you literally are always the person that I look to. Like you look like you're in a music video all the time. Like and so to hear that behind that there's like such complexity and so much thought that goes into it and so much bravery, like you said, because these all of these situations are scary and you have to adapt to them and you have to decide to lean into that. And
Mhm.
that's where that bravery comes from. Like that's the piece. So curious, how did you're living in Oakland. I know that you at some point got into CrossFit. Oh, I forgot to ask, were you still in your relationship?
I was in a different relationship, which was toxic for different reasons.
Yeah.
And the guy, my ex was we had met in Wisconsin. We actually bartended together, and I was not trying to get in a relationship because I was like, I'm moving to California. And then he's like, well, what if I came with? And I was still like, I clung on to that because the fear part,
Yeah.
and I was
Yeah.
like, "Yeah, yeah, you should come with." But part of me was like, "What are you doing?"
Did you guys live together or
We
were
did,
you live
yeah. So we went from
Oh,
not living together in Wisconsin, but dating in a very just like stupid. It was a stupid relationship.
yeah.
I learned a lot. I learned a lot, but like looking back, I'm like, what were you doing? Um, and so, yeah, he eventually moved out and met me in Oakland, and we lived together in Oakland, which was, there was a source of comfort of in that, and we went
Yeah.
and explored stuff. So part of it was like, okay, this feels safe, and like it felt so adult at the time too, because I was trying so
Yeah.
hard to move away from seeing myself as a kid to seeing myself as like an adult who had
A
their stuff together.
functioning. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so I'm like, oh, this is such a more mature relationship, and we live together, and oh my gosh, like some of the lies you tell yourself,
Yeah. But you're young too. I mean, I feel like everyone's not I'm not trying to downplay this at all, but
No,
like,
no.
first relationships are hard. Like you're learning how to do that. And so
Right, right.
inevitably, whatever it looks like, I mean, even in the best of circumstances, like they're still kind of stupid.
They
Like, but they're
are.
necessary.
Yeah, I mean, then again, you're right, all these people, all these experiences are mirrors, right, for your own life.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
sometimes you can see it clearer when you're away from it, but
Yeah. How did you get into, because you are a very accomplished, I would call you an athlete. I know you're going to be like, I'm not, but you are. Um, you are very active. Like you very much love adventure and the outdoors. Like at this point in your life, you've gotten a handle on like who you're going to become. But
Mhm.
at what point did you start to integrate like your love of adventure and CrossFit and like start educating in that realm too?
Yeah, so my love of adventure was already kind of in there, but I didn't quite feel the same independence that I feel now or that I built into. My sister was my adventure buddy, and we did a few trips together, and she really, again, she's my role model. She, my little sister's my big sister.
Oh.
But
Uh,
we had done some trips together. She had already been doing some solo travel that was like really inspiring to me, and I was, wanting to like kind of explore some of the same experiences that she was having. And moving to a new place felt like adventurous, right? And being able to just explore the Bay Area was really
yeah,
cool and stuff in that sense. So that I think that part of adventure was in there, and it just started to grow more, which was nice.
yeah.
Um, then there's the whole like cross. How did I get into CrossFit? Like where did that come from? Because that just seems like out of left field. And I was not, I would say, an athletic person at this point. I was like struggling to run every day. Like my motivation was low. I had started running a bit in college with my roommate. It was more like just we struggled to breathe for an hour. Really, I don't know if you can call what we did running, but we did something.
Was it just like a desire to do something healthy or like,
Yeah, I think it started kind of vanity of like, you should do something. You're not you're not as active as you were in like high school doing all the sports and
yeah,
right? There's a vanity component to it. And so I don't think that was good motivation for me either because I knew I was doing like I was running, but I felt like I should run and I was forcing myself to run because I thought I had to run, but I also like hated it.
yeah,
There was a part of me that like kind of liked the physical part of it, but also mostly just hated it. And one of my instructors in school at the Academy of Art, he opened my world to so many things. Like he's still a good friend of mine. I would call him one of my mentors and who has, I'm very grateful and lucky to have this person in my life. He was my teacher for one of my software classes, like learning Photoshop and Illustrator and Adobe products. We both like just discovering, like chatting with class, we discovered that he lived in the East Bay as well, so that was cool because a lot of people lived in San Francisco because the school was in San Francisco, but it was too expensive. So I was commuting, and he also lived in the East Bay, like kind of close to where I was living. And he was like, "Oh my gosh, you should come to my gym. Like I have a CrossFit gym. It's part of like a rock climbing gym." He's like, "You should just come check it out." And I was like laughing at at the time. I was like, because I kind of knew what CrossFit was, and I was like, "That's terrifying." I'm like, "I
yeah,
don't do CrossFit." I'm like, "But I'll come climb. Like I'll come check it out sometime. Like that could be fun." And I remember talking to my boyfriend at the time and being like, "Hey, do you want to check out this gym?" And he was kind of like, "No, I don't. You go." I'm like, "Okay, whatever." And so I, after my teacher had harass me a few times about like getting out there, and eventually I came to like a barbecue because they would have like these community events. He's like, "Well, just come. You don't have to do anything. Just come and meet people and say hi. You know me, blah blah blah."
Yeah.
And I did that, and I there's so many stories within the story.
I
One you
know.
already know, Kashia, is that I met my current husband at this barbecue while dating somebody else. So that was already like,
But did
again,
you
it was
already have an
a.
eye for him? Like, were you like, he's cute?
This was the first time I met him was at the barbecue. So as
Yeah.
soon as I saw him, I was like, "Oh, he's cute." But I'm
Okay,
like, "Oh,
we
I
can.
can't think this." But and my boyfriend came to the barbecue because that was the only thing that he was comfortable with coming because he didn't want to come climb, he didn't want to do CrossFit. But I was like,
Yeah.
okay, the barbecue is safe, and so he was with me at that barbecue. And I remember meeting Chris, my husband, there because he, came up and introduced himself because he won't admit to it, but he's an extrovert, and he was like, "Do you want to dance?" Because they were playing salsa music, and I was like sitting right next to my boyfriend at the time, and in my head, I was like, so desperately yes, but I had to say no. And so I was like, "Oh no, blah blah blah." And later, come to figure out, Chris thought that that guy I was with was my brother at the time because there was no chemistry. Um,
Uh,
but anyway, again, it's an example that like I went to something that I was like uncomfortable with going to, but again, it opened my eyes, and I'm like, oh,
this is a whole nother world.
yeah, yeah. So as I got comfortable, and my teacher, his name's Daron, he encouraged me to come to some classes, and I started like dabbling. I'm like, okay, I'll just show up and see what I can do. Like I felt like I could trust him, and I'm like, okay, at least he's got my back, and I got nothing to lose. I know nothing about this realm, so I can't be faulted because I'm doing it
Yeah.
bad because I know nothing, which is
Yeah.
such like a, there's an insecurity there, but it's a funny way that I would justify things to myself, I guess. Like no one can fault me because I really just don't know anything.
Which is
um
actually incredible because look at all these scenarios where you're just like, I've never done it, so I guess I can try. And if I suck, I suck. I mean,
right.
but you inevitably don't. You're really good at everything you do. Like,
Well,
my husband is like the same way. He's like, I've never done this before, but I guess I'll try it. And you're like, cool. The NBA just called and they want to know if you are
I
free
know.
next season.
Kevin is really good at everything. It's
Yeah,
impressive.
it's annoying.
I can
That's
understand
why I
that.
refuse to exercise with him.
Like that's your thing. I
But
have my thing.
but I love this because you really started to I feel like you're at this stage in your life where you're starting to discover all of these new things about yourself for the first time. Like this is the first time where you're away from, prejudgment or like your dad really saying like you should do this, you should do that. And I know that there's a little bit of that voice in your own head, but I feel like this is the part where you're starting to break through and you're like, why not? Let's just see what happens. And then,
Yeah.
I mean, I know as the story goes, you ended up being really good, and I'm imagining it's because like through testing yourself, you're like, this is something I really enjoy.
Yeah. Yeah. Leaning into things that brought me joy. And who knew that that could be the way to go? Instead of shooting yourself all the time, I should do this or I shouldn't do that. I was just like, well, what do
Yeah,
I want to do? And
yeah,
I think when you've been stuck in a mindset so long of thinking that you have to follow the shoulds and like what people expect of you and the expectations you put on yourself, it can be hard to know what you want too because your brain gets confused, right? The wants versus what you think you're supposed to do.
yeah. This is basically, I feel like we should title your episode like "How Not to Live a Shitty Life."
That sounds about right.
How to live a great life and not a shitty one.
Yeah. The
Uh,
you do you, boo.
what our listeners are probably starting to glean onto is that like you've discovered like that, art and design is going to be the way for you and that,
Mhm.
CrossFit ends up becoming one of your loves and later on down the road you end up didn't they ask you guys to like take over or head the gym for a while
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Crazy turn of
Uh,
events.
yeah. So I mean, you really started paving this path where all of these opportunities, presented themselves, and you got to choose what made you feel the best. Um, the way that you live your life now is something that I really admire because one, you took your degree and your education and became, you are this independent graphic artist. You're incredible. Anything that I ever do, I personally reach out to Brynn to hire her for, because literally anything design related that you can think of. Like I could show her something and be like, "Hey, I'm thinking about doing this for an event. Like, what do you think?" And she'll come back to me with a rendering like 24 hours later, and it's like exactly what I had imagined. You're really good. You're really intuitive. You have a great creative sense. Like you ended up leaving your brother. Just kidding. So, an aside, and this is not a podcast about romantic comedies, but I will say on the other side of this, I remember my cousin being like, I met this girl, and he had gotten out of a long-term relationship that was, you know, I think he would describe it as toxic. I won't label it as that, but I'll just drop that there. But I remember him reaching out and being like, "Hey, I met this girl." and, and him being like, I don't have a picture of her, but this is her Instagram. It's private, but like you can see the circle of her face. And I'm like, you are such
The
a
tiny blurry
nerd.
dot.
Yes. But I was like, wow, she looks really beautiful. You did. You are. And cut to today, you guys have built this life for your homeowners. He's become this really successful firefighter. Like you guys travel everywhere. It's incredible. And I really admire how you are the sole purveyor of like all your own hopes and dreams. And like how that's the thread here. Of everything in your life that you've created, like, did you ever expect for it to turn out this way?
No, absolutely not. I am not like a what do I want to do in 5 years person. Like
Yeah.
I hate that question actually.
Yeah.
I've always like wondered like, huh, what am I gonna be when I'm an adult? But I was never like, this is what I'm gonna be when I'm an adult. It's like I wonder who I will be, which
Yeah.
is I think different from how some people try to like plan their lives or whatever. So I never thought that this is where I would be. And I'm very happy that this is where I am. And I know a lot of people talk about like, do you regret anything along the way? And I think in the moment there was things that certain events that I definitely felt like, "Ugh, I probably should have done that differently. But I
Mm-hmm.
love how things have turned out. Like I think there's a mixture of luck, a mixture of my own, intuition and being able to trust my gut. Some of it's taking a chance. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but all of it's all learning. Like even if I've made like a weird call along the way, or not a weird call, but a call that didn't work out well along the way, I learned from it, right? I'm like, well, I never have to
Yeah.
be that person again. I never have to do that thing again. I can approach this in a different light. And I think that being flexible in that sense is helpful for me. For someone who also doesn't like know what they want to do in 5 years and being just really guided by gut and intuition and what feels authentic, uh, that's the only way I can guide myself.
But I really admire that because there is this cord of bravery that guides you. It's like you have this innate confidence and self-trust, and whatever comes your way, you can kind of figure it out based on what your gut is telling you. And like through that through thread, I think has enabled you to choose a partnership that is really aligned with what you want in life. It's like no longer toxic. Like it's allowed you to, you know, build this really strong like home foundation. You have a beautiful home, which I'm like looking at. I can tell you guys have like done some more cool stuff. Side note, my cousin picked up, you guys both also, this is really fun. Like as adults, like you're continuously picking up new things, new tricks, new hobbies. And at the core of all of it is either adventure or creativity. But I really, you know, I love having this conversation because I can see where that, again, bravery comes from of just like trying something new. Like I remember when we were starting to surf like 5, 6, 7 years ago, we were both like, we'll just like get in the waves and see what happens. And we got
Yeah.
totally pitted, brah. I'm still not a very good surfer. But like now you're going off to surf camps and it's like we're in our like mid 30s now and you're like really like leaning into like surfing and we both like we all got dive certified and you and Chris just like
Yeah.
got nitrox certified. So it's like really speaks to how if you just keep trusting in yourself and trying new things, like you live like one of the most vibrant, like adventurous lives that I know. And
Thank you.
it's really cool. You're
We
so
really like it. You're cool.
you're so cool. I want to be you when I grow up.
No, I love your support.
Um
And that's part of it too, is like, I think figuring out what relationships suit you or don't suit you and leaning into the ones that really feel supportive have helped. Because I don't think I would have necessarily done any of these things if I ever felt truly on my own. I always had my sister as support. I had, my mentor at school as support. I met Chris, who definitely felt supportive. So
yeah.
and I got to a point with my mom where we could talk and like breach that level, and she definitely turned into a level of support for me, which I'm really
Yeah.
thankful for. So like being able to have that support and being able to find it,
Yeah.
are two different things. Like I'm very thankful I have it now, but understanding who my support was definitely a part of that journey, and I'm thankful for it.
It's really smartly said. Also, your mom has now been clean and sober for a number of years.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's so impressive. She impresses me with her strength all the time, with her mental fortitude. She's quit smoking and quit drinking. So go, mom.
Woohoo! Go
Go,
mom.
mom.
Go Eve.
Yeah,
She always sends us like the sweetest crocheted things for Jude.
it's very impressive. I
She's very.
I am very excited for her to open her Etsy shop one day. That
Is
should
she
be
going
coming.
to?
She has a stockpile. That's the plan.
That's amazing. Well, I mean, maybe that's part of where your thread of creativity comes from too, because like
Mhm.
her designs are meticulous. I'm trying to like squeeze so much out of this hour. I know I can't keep you forever. I like you are a busy gal. Before we go, one of the things we jump into at the end of our episode is a thing called the Fast Five, where I ask you 5 fun and silly questions before I ask you a very serious and long question. Um, just
Ooh.
kidding. It's the same question we ask all our guests at the end of the interview, and I'm really interested to hear your take on this. But if you're ready, I can jump right into that Fast Five.
I'm ready.
Okay, what is your guilty pleasure?
Oh gosh. Probably just being a couch potato. Just closing the blinds, blocking out, putting my phone in do not disturb, and just like, yeah,
Hissing at anyone that walks by.
pretty much. I get my fur babies up on the couch and we are just a puddle. That's great.
Okay, do you have like a mantra or, something that you tell yourself right before you do the brave thing?
I don't know that I tell myself anything, but I feel like I check in with my body. Like, well, how does my stomach feel? How's my heart feel? Just like recognizing that, and giving it just space, and then being like, okay, well, we're doing it anyway. Thanks.
Okay. What do you do at night to wind down from like a chaotic day?
Oh gosh, yeah. I will, it depends. I veg out. I really enjoy putting my phone away and reading before bed. That feels really nice. So I guess that, like, again, phone and do not disturb. No one talk to me. I'm very much
Okay.
like I like to self-recharge kind of.
Yeah. No, I like that because it like I think that enables you to do so much, especially because your primary job is to create.
Mhm.
So I feel like you probably really need that. Um, Favorite thing you've ever created?
Ooh. Probably stuff I haven't released yet. I don't know. I like I'm such a tortured soul artist, all the stuff I did before is trash. The only good
No.
stuff is the new. I don't really feel there's a part of me that feels that, but not. I don't know. Ah, I don't know if I could say if I have a favorite thing. My life. No, I don't.
That's an
There
answer.
you
I'll
go.
take it. Most annoying thing that Christopher does.
Oh. Uh,
Or your pet peeve. I changed it at the last minute.
okay, okay.
Just want to know.
What does he do? When he will say yes to things or like, yes, we'll do it, but then doesn't have an actionable plan for doing it. Sorry, Chris.
It's so annoying.
Yeah. Like, so who?
He'll be
Me?
like,
I have to do the mental effort? No.
yeah. All right. And here's the final question. We ask this of all our guests. But what is one quality you had as a teen or a young woman that you really didn't take pride in then or you didn't recognize, but you look back at it now and you're like, wow, that's made all the difference and I carry it with me still?
I think it's that I was really opinionated. And I know that kind of sounds contradictory to what I've shared a bit, but I think the thing is that I've always had opinions, but was told to push them down and ignore my own
Yeah.
opinions. And I've with a grain of salt that like opinions are opinions and you don't need to shove them down people's throats. And which is something I probably needed to learn as a kid, but like just knowing my opinions and being okay with sharing them in a healthy way.
I really love that because you are somebody that I think people trust. And I think it emanates off of you because you've done the work, right? So you trust
Hmm.
yourself and you've learned to trust your gut. And I think, when you're in a community, like people get a sense of that. I certainly get a sense of that. Like I said at the beginning, you're the fulcrum, right? Like you're a very stable piece of everyone's life who knows you. And I think it's because you really get a sense that you have done the work, you trust yourself. So what comes out of your mouth, the opinions that you have, they're going to be steadfast and come from a really good place. And I appreciate you so much. You are one of the most talented individuals I know. You are certainly one of the wisest. And I'm so excited to share this with everybody because I tell you all the time, I want to shout your name from the rooftops all the time and from the mountains that we hike and everything. But I think you're the greatest, and people have so much to learn from how you approach life and live life, and it's a gift. It's a gift to know and love you.
Oh.
So, are you taking new clients?
Yes. First, I love you too. I need to put that in there. I love your support and thank you. You've always made me feel, special. But yes, I am taking new clients. I am trying to break into the nonprofit world, which would be really cool to have a client in that sector, especially if it's like climate justice
Yeah,
related. That is like I'm learning what I really want to put more of my energy and efforts into, and that's my new avenue that I'm trying to, break
the
into.
earth.
Yeah, the earth. I like
Yeah.
the earth, right?
Okay, well, for our listeners, if you are looking for literally the best artist, creative graphic designer, we will link her website, but you can find Brynn Brothers at Brynn Brothers on Instagram. She also has a website, www.brynbrothers.com. I love you so much, Brynn. Thank you so much for taking the morning and, having a cup of coffee and just waxing poetic with me. It's been such a great, fulfilling everything morning for me.
Thank you, Keish. I really enjoyed it, and it flew by. I could keep
Yeah.
talking to you for more hours.
Yes, yes. Okay. All right, guys. Until next time, thanks for joining us and spending the morning or the afternoon or wherever you're listening from. See you next time.